the antidote to political and religious tyranny, or the reality of your world. I make these videos to change the way you think, because almost everything you've been taught is designed to stop you from thinking critically and accept everything you're told as truth without question. So far, we've looked at currency, citizenship, biogeology, petrified titans and giants, and started looking at zodiacs in the landscape. So let's continue on now. Now, when I was a kid, I'm dyslexic. So when I was a kid, we had a full set of the Encyclopedia Britannica, which was, that particular edition was 24 volumes. And the first 23 volumes didn't interest me because it was just full of words. And I didn't like words. Words are nasty, horrible things. I hated spelling, the spells. So I used to look at the volume 24, which had the indexing, but it also had the atlas section in it. And I wasn't the only kid that did this as a kid. But by the age of 5, I pretty well knew the shape of the British Isles. I used to love seeing the faces in there. You know, there was a face facing north out of Ireland. There was faces in the Scottish coastline. There was what I thought was a parrot's head at Barrow-in-Furness, and there's an eagle's head at Blackpool facing north. There's the face of Liverpool, and there was the Anglesey. Anglesey was my favourite, I think. I think I fell in love with Anglesey as a kid. And this head, Anglesey is the head. And if you look at it, it's facing to the west. And Holy Island, where you find Holyhead, as we pronounce it, although it's spelt Holyhead. Holy Island is Urius. So when I was a kid back in the 70s, Tutankhamun exhibition came to England, and so all the glossy magazines in the Sunday newspapers, they were full of images of Egypt. And I recognised Holy Island as being a Urius, the snake crown of Isis or deities, the pharaohs. It becomes the symbol of Lower Egypt. And so I knew that Anglesey had some link to Egypt. And so when I started this channel back in 2022, after going and seeing the false narrative of the Star Forts, we went to Berwick-upon-Tweed, and I just did a video saying, this is all wrong. This history is a lie. You can see it. It's evident there in front of you in the bricks and mortar of Berwick-upon-Tweed. And I'd started looking at other things, and I mentioned, you know, how there's a face in Portugal, you know, Lisbon is just below the nose and it's looking out towards America, and this is probably why we're told Christopher Columbus sets off from Portugal, because Portugal is looking at America. So maybe the King and Queen of Portugal, because although Columbus was Spanish, he was sent by the Portuguese. They paid for his trip, allegedly. So they wanted to go and see what they were looking at, maybe. Although I think maps existed long before then of what was there, what was out there. And they just didn't well, we won't admit it because we haven't been there. We'll go and rediscover it and claim it for ourselves. So, like I say, I wasn't the only child to look at these. And I did do a video, I think it's video 11 of my Star Fort series, looking at the different shapes and saying that Ireland looked like a dog to me. Because if you turn it round 90 degrees anti-clockwise, you get a dog. So the face that I saw is the dog's face at the north of Ireland, north coast. And so another child, 15 years or so before me, had also been looking at the maps and recognised that there was sort of like a lady in North Wales with an outstretched arm. The Llyn Peninsula is the arm to Anglesey being the head. And then there was a big beast at the south, on the south of Wales, which I also saw as a child. And he saw them too. And he saw the fishy tail of Devon and Cornwall. Cornwall is a fish tail. It's a fish leaping out of the water. The Scilly Isles become the pool of what the rings, as you know, something as a fish jumps out of the water, it leaves the ripple, the rings of water where it's broken the surface. And then he saw the large face of East Anglia, again as I saw as a child too. And a chance trip to Glastonbury and a bookshop in Glastonbury found him looking at Mary Cain's book, which explained Catherine Maltwood's work. And he recognised the images within the work, within the Glastonbury Zodiac. He recognised Virgo was North Wales, Leo was South Wales. He recognised Pisces was that fishy tail of Cornwall, and Sagittarius was East Anglia, the face, very large face. And he dismissed it at first, as we all would have done, I guess. But on his drive home, he pondered it, and then when he got home, he looked at the maps, and basically, over the next 10 years, this was back in 1990 when he started, but when he got to 2000, he basically worked out that the whole of the English coastline from Middlesbrough down to Dover, over to Land's End, and back up to the Lake District was, in fact, a graphical representation of the Zodiac, not dissimilar to the Glastonbury Zodiac. So he discovered the graphical representations of the Zodiac within the coastline of the British Isles, from Middlesbrough south to Dover, over to Land's End, back up to the Lake District. But he had three differences. Cancer was missing from the coastline. Scorpio was in Northern Ireland, and then he found a 13th symbol, which he, I believe, misidentified as Gemini's unidentical twin, because it's next to Gemini on this particular zodiac. I believe that his griffin, which is what it is, or a sphinx, with the eagle's head at Blackpool facing north, is in fact the constellation of Ophiuchus. Now, Ophiuchus in the modern constellation, because the Glastonbury constellations do vary from our modern perspective. Now, Ophiuchus in the modern constellation is basically the snake bearer. That's what the translation is, Ophiuchus, snake bearer. And they show this guy wrestling a snake. But you look at the griffin and you compare the outline of the griffin, the overall shape, and it is the constellation of Ophiuchus. It's the same shape as the constellation of Ophiuchus. They've just put this man in to fill the space up because they didn't want you to know about the griffin. The shape of Cancer is implied by the coastline, and is actually he overlaid the shape of the Glastonbury Cancer, the boat, which is not a crab, it's a boat. The ark, he overlaid it, and basically all the land creatures of the Zodiac are inside the ship. And the points that he draws actually then become marked by lighthouses off the coast of South Wales. There are, because there's a bit of a funny point on the end of the boat, they're actually marked by lighthouses. I know. In my head, I go, oh, they're arc lights. But And then the only other problem I have with his work was Scorpio in Northern Ireland. Now, when we look at England and Wales, where one zodiacal image finishes, another one starts. There is no gaps around the coastline. Aries is quite big, so he sticks out both north and south. But Northern Ireland is on its own, but it's attached to this great big landmass. So as I'm looking at Ophiuchus, and this is commonly referred to as the 13th sign of the zodiac, there is another constellation that's sometimes linked and associated with the zodiac, and that's the constellation of Cetus. So I go and have a look for an image of Cetus, and I got one of these nice pen and ink ones. This is it. And Cetus here, well, he's got a curly tail on the end. He's got a fish tail, but he's sniffing at the harp. So I'm thinking, well, that's definitely associated with Ireland, the harp, which is also a heart shape. If you watch Stellium 7, he refers to the heart being harp shape. And there is a reference, there is a correlation there between the harp and the heart. Pull on the heart strings, pull on the harp strings. We'll have to look at that another time, I think. I think there's a lot more to that connection there. But yeah, so I joked and said, oh, look, Ireland's sniffing the Guinness. But then if you go back and you look up Cetus, in Greek mythology, it specifically states that Cetus has got hind legs, and this drawing didn't. So we look at Ireland again and we see, oh yeah, he's got front paws and he's got hind paws. He's got hind legs and front legs. Yeah, 4 legs, hind legs. So in Greek mythology, Poseidon calls upon Cetus, the Kraken, to do his dirty work. And I'll let you look into the mythology on all of that. But he's definitely described as having hind legs. And then a video popped up. Just looked at that. A video popped up. It's amazing how these algorithms work, isn't it? So a video pops up about the 5 best things in Ireland. I can't tell you what any of them were, apart from the middle one. Number 3 were the second highest sea cliffs in Europe are in County Mayo, and they're here, and they're called the Crochen Cliffs. And I'm thinking, what? Kraken? I'm sure she just said Kraken in her Irish accent, but no, it's Crochen. Now, there's an association then with Ireland and Norway and Isle of Man and the east coast of Scotland. So apparently the Norse went over to Iceland and then they came and they basically Isle of Man was ruled by the Vikings or the Norwegian. So I'm thinking, oh, I wonder if that's. And they also have then mythology about the Kraken. The Kraken lives somewhere between Norway and Iceland. And I'm thinking, well, Kraken, Croken, same thing. But Croken in Scandinavian, Norwegian, I forget which now. Basically, there's a rudimentary translation. Croak han is crooked hand. And if we look at County Mayo, where the Croken Cliffs are, we see it's a hand. It's crooked. It's like a shepherd's crook. It's trying to grab something. It's like reaching out for something. It's a crooked hand, Croken. And is this why the Irish enjoy the Kraken? They enjoy the crack. Oh, get a load of the crack on that. Or maybe they don't say it that way. Maybe that's just me. So, from Graham's work, I've now re-identified his griffin as a futurus. I've identified the coastline that was joint to the scorpion, and the kraken, basically, Thetis, is the whole of Era Island. And that just left me a little blob of land in the middle of this giant zodiac. That's the Isle of Man.